Hey, Word on Curve podcast, family and friends. Welcome back to the studio. I'd like to thank my producers, Christina and Frank Sasso, for encouraging me to stay committed. I appreciate that. Thank you. You can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and wherever podcasts are. Welcome. Topic tonight is twofold. It's about peace and why I left the room. And by the room, it means people, places, or things. Family, friends, significant other, not others, other, um, co-workers, and etc. It's about all of that and why I left the room. So let's talk about this a little bit. Let's unpack it. And for those of you who have an opinion, feel free to share it in the comments. What doesn't apply, please let it fly. I want to remind you to hydrate. I know that's a corny little saying, but I love it. What doesn't apply, let it fly. Peace is expensive, and getting to it requires letting go of people, places, and things. It's expensive, and it never goes on sale for the right people. Now, some people will sell their peace, but I'm not one of them. So let's unpack people, places, and things. And it's difficult because oftentimes there will be people, places, and things that we thought we'd be associated with forever. Nothing is forever except death and taxes. Remember that. Tea, water, hydrate, moisturize your face, hands, and feet, and mind your business. That's right, because that's a big part of peace. Mind your business. But the toll it takes to achieve that peace is not talked about too much. You know, you'll see people and you'll say, oh, that piece looks good on you. You don't know the toll it took to get to that. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to share my experience, strength, and hope, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. It's an unpaved road. And by unpaved, I mean it's not easy. It's not always easy. And sometimes I have to adjust my mic. Forgive me. I'm going to have to go back out and make sure it is working. Just give me a second. Whoever's on the podcast, just put in the comments whether you can hear me or not. I think I've lost my sound. I would appreciate the assistance. Thank you. Is my sound working? Just hold on for a second. You know, technical difficulties always present. That's what technology is sometimes, just difficulties. So just give me a second, please, while I check my sound. I am in the studio alone. I don't have any background with me tonight, and that's always difficult. However, we can get it done. I've learned a few things, so just hang in there with me for a minute. Okay? Just for a minute. Just hang in there. I am going to figure out whether the sound is working. So, can you hear me? No, you cannot. Camera is. Let's get to this because these are difficult situations. Hi, Sora Benetter. Coming in loud and clear. Thank you. I certainly appreciate that. So let's get back to the topic. Peace is expensive, and mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it can and will take a toll in achieving it. It's often an unpaved road in that nobody really talks about or shares experience, strength, and hope about what it takes to achieve peace. So let's think about that for a minute. It's difficult. And no doubt, it's certainly worth it, but it's not easy. It's not easy because, again, we have to let go of people, places, and things. And one of the things I learned a long time ago, what you may consider indifference is simply me minding my business and taking care of my whole soul. I realized that achieving and maintaining peace, in many instances, dealing with people, places, and things, I had to mind my business. And that's not always easy for folks because when it's your kids, sometimes you want to jump in. When it's family members, you want to give unsolicited advice. And many of us do. We claim we don't, but we do. Just in some of the things we share, we do, you know. And so if I walked away from anything or anybody, it was usually about achieving and or maintaining my peace. It was personal because it takes courage to make the sacrifice to save yourself. And sometimes, this is a hit, y'all. Pay attention. If you don't know you're being robbed of your peace, you can't do anything about the stick up. You have to know what's robbing your peace. And here's what I found out. Now, again, this is my experience, strength, and hope because I know that peace is expensive in letting go of people, places, and things. I've walked away from family to achieve and maintain peace. And that was difficult. It was painful. I cried about it, for a very long time. And it took a minute for me to get with some acceptance. I let go of friends that I had been involved with for years, from the early days of remembering who I was and where I came from. I had to let some of them go because they were robbing me. They were robbing me of my peace. And maintaining peace, when you achieve it, is difficult to maintain sometimes too. It is because it requires constant work. When I left some family members behind, many of you won't admit this, you'll just stop talking to people. But I left them behind. And I left them behind because, number one, they didn't want to pull up. That's number one. And number two is they were robbing me of my peace. They were robbing me of my ability to rest peacefully in my soul. I let go. Doesn't mean I don't love them. Doesn't mean I don't care about them. I let go. And once I find out who you are, you can't come back and show me somebody different. And I know people have the ability to change. But baby, when the representative is there and that's the first thing that shows up is chaos, I'm not built for it. Never have been. I learned a lot of things. And a lot of things were lessons, and a lot of things were blessings. Really. And, when you're going through, excuse me, when you're going through that letting go phase to maintain or achieve your peace, it's hard. And sometimes you got to cry. Because again, that road is not always paved. It is not. It can be rocky. It can be uncomfortable. You'll fall down sometimes. You'll get back up. But it's not easy to achieve peace. And nobody talks about it. Nobody tells you that in order to let go, you're going to have to cry sometime. You're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to deal with the mental and emotional, part of letting go. That's why letting go is so hard, even when it's toxic. It's difficult to let go because it requires a lot. And sometimes we just don't have it in us. And it takes courage because it's scary. Because sometimes in letting go, you lose one thing to gain another. Yeah. And achieving and maintaining peace, that happens. And again, this is my experience, strength, and hope. Whatever yours is, feel free to drop it in the comments. But this is mine. It's what I've experienced. With friends, letting them go. It was painful. It was incredibly painful. Just imagine thinking, that you're going to be in a partnership, a relationship, anything that's going to be for as long as, you want it to be. And then it's not. And it's not always easy to explain. It's not always easy to understand. But when you're being robbed, when the stick up is happening and you're sad, if you'll just stop and back up for a minute, as I did a very long time ago, you'll learn that you got to disconnect. And so with friends, I've disconnected from friends that I dearly loved because they were robbing me of my peace. Whether they saw it or accepted it or rejected it didn't matter. Once I realized I was being robbed, I walked away. And I didn't feel a need to explain. That's right. Because if you're chaotic and you're robbing people of peace and you're always in a situation where it's anxious and there's something going on, why do I need to explain that to anybody who's an adult? The only person that can wreak that type of havoc in my life is my grandson, and that's because he's 5, and he even gets a timeout every now and then. You know, I learned that whenever I was sad, it was as a direct result. This is the Word on the Curb, baby. This is Word on the Curb podcast. I'm Annette. I'm your host here, and I'm bringing it to you live. Whenever I was sad, what I realized was that I had overextended my boundaries. That's what I learned. I had overextended my boundaries because naturally, you know, I enjoy supporting others. I do. And typically would do it without hesitation, without any hesitation at all. It just came natural. But what I learned, the lesson and the blessing in that was that I was calling when others weren't calling. I was extending myself to protect people and to help people who were always too busy to extend and help me. I was younger then. I had to learn. I was younger. I was calling people who didn't return calls. I was accepting last minute invitations. You know, I was connected to sometimey people. And let me tell you something. When people don't make time for you, they're too busy to make time for you. That's a peace robber. And although you may not recognize it right away, when you're sad, I'm telling you, or when you're feeling out of sorts, if you'll just take a minute and look at yourself and look at what's surrounding you, I promise you, you'll find the robbers. They're right there in your face. They're not hiding. They're right there in your face. So when people are too busy, you know, to extend themselves to you, sometimes you just have to learn how to back up and let go. You do. You have to learn how to back up and let go, and it's not easy. Peace is expensive. It's not for sale, and some people sell their peace to get along with others. That's a high price to pay. That's a very high price to pay. You know, sometimes you will go along to get along, but if that's the norm and that's something that happens more often than not, you're being robbed. You're being stuck up. And if you don't recognize that you're being stuck up, you know, that you're being robbed, you don't know how to deal with it. When you have those uncertain feelings and you're not sure, I'm telling you, this is Word on the Curb. It's out there and people ignore it. Look at the reasons why your peace is gone. Is it a toxic relationship? Because sometimes we're in toxic relationships, family, friend, co-workers. Hey, I walked away from a job I love to protect my peace. I made a decision one day, it was not planned. I knew I would be retiring, but I made a decision one day that I'd had enough. And I didn't care who it was and who it was about. I'd had enough. And I was being robbed. And I was empty. And I knew that there was nothing I could pour out to be of help to myself or anybody else because I was empty. I left the room. I left the room. That's what I mean when I say I left the room. I left the room with friends. I left the room with family. I left the room with coworkers. I left the room with business partners. I left the room with a former that I adored because it was toxic. I left the room. And I want to tell you, in leaving that room, the room I entered, that room of peace, once I could exhale and, just do my thing, was so much better than those rooms that I tried to stay in and work it out. It's not worth hanging around in those rooms. Those rooms will poison you. And sometimes when we're being robbed of our peace and God sees it, He removes us from that table because He recognizes that we're being poisoned even when we fight to sit at that table. So sometimes, when we pull up a chair where there is no chair, we have to be careful that they're not serving poison at that table. That means they are not robbing us of our peace. And sometimes there will be moments when the road is unpaved and we'll be in difficult situations, and that's okay. It's called life. It's the line of life. It happens. But if that's a regular, I think you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. And nobody else is in charge of your peace except you. Nobody. I learned that a long time ago. And there were times, even as I matured, that I struggled with it. And I wanted to go back and make things work with family, friends, and foe. And I just, had to get what my hand called for. I mean, that happens. When you ignore the obvious, that happens. And you cannot fix it if you're not aware of it. So being aware of what's getting into your whole soul is what's important. If you're being robbed of your peace, the price is too high. And I don't care who it concerns. The price is much, much, much too high. And we have to be cognizant of that if, we're going to take care of our soul. We have to be aware of that. And Bernetta says, wow, or it's a table he would have flipped. Yeah, God's flipped a few tables on me. And I certainly, listen, it was a lesson and a blessing, and I appreciate it now. I didn't always understand it, but I appreciate it now. And so when you're being robbed of your peace, just take a look at what's around you. And remember that peace is expensive. It takes courage. It takes, being mentally and spiritually settled in your mind and your soul to deal with it, because that road's not paved. There are stones that you're stepping on in bare feet, and the bare feet is your heart and your mind and your emotions. That's the bare feet. When you're stepping on rocks and stones, it hurts. But up ahead, when you get through it, that peace is worth it. And I have to remind myself that I have to continuously work on maintaining that peace. That takes work too. There are a lot of people who create chaos. And the other thing I learned, and I'm going to wrap it up, some people don't have the capacity to give you what you need in toxic relationships, in relationships that rob you of your peace. Some people don't have the capacity to do that. And once I accepted and understood that, my life got so much better. It got so much better. It did. I realized when I walked away from a partner that I thought I would be spending a lot of time, if not all time, with them after becoming a widow. After becoming a widow, I thought that the time with this person, there would be some longevity. And when I had to walk away from them, it was painful. But it's the best thing I ever did. Until you realize you're being robbed, you can't fix it. So the capacity of people to give you what you need is an understanding on your journey to peace that you'll all the time, every time you'll have to come to that understanding and respect it. But before you can respect any of that, respect yourself. My name is Annette. I'm your host here at Word on the Curb. I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. Welcome you back next week where we'll continue some conversations. Peace is expensive. Don't put it in the bargain bin. because the only person that's going to suffer when you do that is you. How do I know? I suffered a lot unnecessarily because I thought I could fix some things. I had to fix myself. Have a good night. And again, thank you for joining me here at Word on the Curb. We'll see you next week at 8 p.m. on Wednesday. Every Wednesday at 8 p.m., we're here to talk about it. You want to join our podcast live? Hit me up at Word on the Curb podcast. No, Word on the Curb 29 at gmail.com. Word on the Curb podcast at gmail.com, or ring me at 1-856-425-0737 and come on live with us. We talk about dating. We talk about us. We talk about peace. We talk about robbers. We talk about liars. We talk about politics. We talk about the word on the curb. See you soon. Have a good evening.